That's where when things are bad, people get tough. And when people get tough, they start working. And when they start working, things start getting better. And when things start getting better, they get easier. When things get easier, people get lazy. And when people get lazy, things get hard.
Welcome everyone to today's episode of the Jeff Heilman Project. My name is Jessica Heilman and I'm sitting across from Jeff Heilman.
What's up?
We are parents in the Silicon Valley. We're business owners in the Silicon Valley. We've been running this podcast now for 27 weeks, 26 weeks. We're in the high 20s at least. We've been married for 27 years and we have 7 beautiful children. Just a little bit about us. We are unschoolers, which means we do not follow any traditional system of education, but we are definitely thought provokers and innovators.
We like education. We like
Definitely.
growing and improving as people, as humans.
Definitely. But we also ascribe to the philosophy that you're not going to want to learn something if you're not interested in it.
Yeah, I have a much easier time staying focused on something that I want to learn about, right?
So today's episode I thought would be fun. Today we're going to tell some stories. Today we're going to kind of go back in the mental archive of throughout the last 27 years. And don't worry, we're not going to take 27 hours and going through all of these years of stories. But there are quite a few highlights that hopefully, as we continue to expand and talk about stories, that you will find interesting. So I would highly encourage you to sit back with a cup of coffee, grab a glass of whiskey. I don't know, whatever it is you choose to be drinking tonight.
Whiskey, listening to this.
Well, why not?
I hope it's relaxing for you.
That's right, because we're fun and exciting people to talk to, right? Before we get into story time, we can call it story time with the Heilmans here.
Nap time, depending on how much
What's
you're
going
drinking.
on with you? You've had a pretty you've got a great weekend planned. You're going out to go to the
Going to the
Huskies
game
game.
up in Seattle this weekend. And yeah, got a new job. Working at a new job, sleeping a lot while your mind figures out how to build the synapses around making business happen. It's an exciting time. It's a growth time.
We got to go out to lunch today at this really great Italian
What was that place
restaurant.
called? All I know is the guy.
It's Locanda, Locanda Sorrento. Locanda Sorrento.
Yeah,
It's
had a
Italian.
Huge charcuterie board. And
Oh
plate
my
of
gosh,
food,
it was so good.
bottle
So
of Sauvignon Blanc.
if you're in this area, if you're in the Bay Area, look it up and definitely go and. Last week we talked about innovation. We talked about the iPhone 15, and you're limping through with the 13 right now. It's a small one, so I don't know why you subject yourself. I don't know why you subject yourself.
I don't know
to
why
it.
I didn't check, but it's a good motivator because I'll have my iPhone 15 and I can take this one back. Gosh, my phone died. The logic board on my phone died like 2 weeks before the iPhone 15 shipped. So I've got to hobble through either taking phone calls on my watch or I got to buy a phone that I will end up returning at the 2-week mark because the iPhone 15 ships tomorrow, I think.
Yeah. So
Pre-order
we've
in the
got
first 2
you got a new
hours.
job. We've got dinner that we had tonight. Is traditionally it's Thursday night right now that we're recording.
Night.
It's traditionally date night. However, we did date lunch,
We did
and
date
so
lunch
that was
instead.
an awesome opportunity to sit. So if you've got kids, I hope that you're definitely taking time to do date nights.
Yeah, and that's something for people that are listening.
Yeah.
We go on dates.
Yes.
We have always.
We used to have a joke that the babysitter was going to have more money than we would because it cost
she
us
did
so
have more
much.
money.
It costs us so much to go on a
$100
date
to go see a
night.
movie.
Plus, with so many kids. Oh my goodness! But definitely made it a priority. We made it a priority to go to date night.
We spend time together, and of course, we were on the phone with CJ, I think, yesterday. And she said, "Oh, I just love that you and Jessica are always. Every time I call, you guys are out together doing something fun." And it's like we've been doing that since long before COVID shut everything down. We like getting out of the house.
So for today's episode, when I say I want to tell stories, I want to hear from you, and I think that the people will want to hear, our listeners will also want to hear from you. I want to hear the story of the first dollar that you made. Like money that you made, not like
The first
this money that
dollar
was
that I
given
ever
to you.
made, there was this cute woman that lived next door. She towered over me because I was like 3'1", but I was 7 years old. Had curly hair, blonde curly hair, like in a perm. You know, this would have been
80s.
1978 or 1981, somewhere in there. And I offered her to mow. Our lawns were connected.
Mm-hmm.
So my lawn just kind of ran right into her lawn, and I was mowing.
I don't think it'd be 1978 because you would have been 4. And I certainly hope you weren't mowing lawns at 4 years old.
7. It would have been 80, 81.
Okay, yeah, 7 years old. That's a little older.
I don't know if she said, hey, would you mow my lawn and I'll pay you $5? Or could I mow your lawn and would you pay me $5? Or maybe it was $10, but it wasn't more than 10. But I think it was $5 or $10. And I mowed her lawn, and I was like, this is more money than I've got in Christmas and birthday combined. And all I had to do was work was for like, an hour and a half to mow her half of this connected lawn. It was basically a unibrow on the ground. And I just remember it was like one of the happiest days of my life. I had the opportunity to make money without going to my parents for it or waiting until my birthday.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Mowing
lawns.
That's your first. That was your first dollar. Gosh.
What was your first dollar?
I wasn't motivated to earn a dollar. Like I would have been the one to just wait for my birthday or wait for Christmas to get money. And
sure.
And so
that makes absolutely no sense to me, but I can appreciate that.
I would, however, I remember growing up, and I would have book sales. I would go through my house, and my mom would have, we did the Scholastic book things every year, and so we'd order a bunch of kids' books, and then I'd have piles of books, and so we'd set up, I remember we set up a table outside our little townhouse, and I'd put books on it and, 10 cents, 50 cents or something like that. So we did that, and I did lemonade stands, and my parents were always very encouraging about, setting up a stand. I always had a little stand of something that I was selling, either books or lemonade or garage sales. We've had lots of garage sales in our lifetime, and that was kind of always the way. I never would have done anything or even thought about doing anything like dog walking or washing windows or mowing lawns. I just don't think that like manual labor crossed my mind. It was more a factor of like selling things, used things, reselling used things. I think maybe it's because I was a girl or something. I don't know.
I remember you told me you played store a little bit when you were...
Oh, I always played store and teacher. I would always either line up my dolls, store, teacher, or I would we would go out into the field where there was dirt on the ground because it's California, it's very dry, and I would take a stick and I would draw floor plans in the dirt of rooms, and I would draw where the couches would be, and I'd draw where the TV would be.
We did dirt drawing.
Dirt drawing.
Yeah, back before smartphones.
Did you draw houses or what? Or like football plans or what?
I remember drawing houses on paper. In the dirt, I was mostly playing Matchbox cars.
Yeah. We'd draw houses in the dirt in like actual 10 by 10 rooms with where the door would go, and then we'd walk into our little houses, and then we'd play house that way. I
had a friend of mine, Jason, that lived down the street, and his dad built this. It was no joke. It was like a playhouse, but it was like full size, like a 2-story plywood playhouse, and we used to play in that thing, and for some reason, I don't know how that thing held up under our weight. It was all plywood and 2x4s, but his dad built this thing, and we played on that thing for years.
Yeah.
And there was a little set of stairs in the back. It was like a pop-up window on the pop-up. It was a door on the ground, and you would walk up it, and then there was a stairs up in the back, and then you'd have a window on the second floor. And the second floor was like,
20 feet, like an actual second floor?
No, but it was like head high, and I was, if I'm 5 feet tall, it was like 5 feet off the ground. We played in that thing. We played I can't say the name of the game, but it's basically, trying to think of the analogy. It was find the one that doesn't fit in with the ball. You can do the math from there. You're not allowed to say the name of that game anymore. But we played a lot of football in the street. We never played tackle. We played some tackle football in the street, but it's mostly two-hand touch. And we rode bikes.
Okay, if we're going to talk about what we used to do when we were kids, we could not tell this story. And I think everybody who's listening, you guys are going to laugh. Tell us about the big black bouncy thing. And the roof.
Tony, oh my God.
Tony, if you're listening.
Tony, if you even exist, if you're not dead, I hope you're alive. I haven't heard from Tony in 20 years.
We were praying you didn't get overtaken by the big black bouncy thing.
Tony's dad was he was in, I think he was in Vietnam, and let's just say he came back and we were not sure his dad was like.
Yeah, let's just say he was out there, yeah.
But he was cool and he let us do stuff, and he didn't like when you're a boy, as long as
when
you
you're
can
a boy
disappear
growing up in the 70s
for 12 hours, and your parents are cool that you just take off and don't tell them where you're going, and you don't have a cell phone, and you're not going to go to a payphone to call your parents.
It was different times. I mean, we basically, unless we were hungry or hurt, we didn't come home, right?
Yeah, we were just gone.
Yeah,
it was daylight, and there was no school. We were at our friend's house playing, right? So Tony's dad, I don't know how he secured this. It was probably Army surplus. He secured this like 5,000 gallon, 3/4 inch, like metal plate thick rubber, not reusable fuel tank. It was either for fuel or for water, but they would put like 5,000 gallons of something in it, probably water, and it was used to haul water in the supply chain up to the front lines.
So I've always imagined, because you've told the story of the big black bouncy thing before, and I'm imagining that it's like a jelly bean, like a big black jelly bean.
It's not like a jelly bean.
Is it an oval?
It's more like a pillow. It was like a pillow.
So it was rectangle.
It was rectangular and flat.
Okay.
But like a pillow, if you had inflated a pillow, the edges would come up.
Mm-hmm.
So he would fill it with air.
How wide are we talking? Is it like 10 feet? Like if you could say dimensions.
Probably like 10 by 15.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right? And it would hold like 5,000 gallons of, and it even said it was stenciled in.
Because our above ground pool that we have.
How much is that? How many gallons is that?
Is 6,000 gallons, and it is.
So this would have been like 2,000 gallons.
14 feet long by 5 feet tall.
Okay, so this would have been like 2,000 gallons.
Okay.
This would have been like 14 feet long by, 3 feet high.
Okay.
But we'd fill it with air, and then we would have one guy sit on one side of the big black bouncy thing, this fuel tank, this military grade fuel tank, and we'd have the other guy jump off of Tony's roof and send the guy who was sitting on the big black bouncy thing as a projectile. If we could, we tried to go over a 6-foot fence.
Wait,
so
is it the neighbor's yard? Where are you going?
No, it's his backyard. It was Tony,
if you were successful and you made it over the fence, where would you go into?
Out of the backyard, into the street where we played tackle football. And there were some times when you kind of doubled over. You didn't quite make it all the way over the fence, so you'd end up doubled over on a cedar fence, kind of wiggling, going, "Oh, get me off of here!" Right? It was basically like trying to do Tony Hawk without the skateboard. Yeah. So that was a big black bouncy.
Oh my God.
We did that for like 8 years. I think we were shaving by the time we finished playing with the big black bouncy thing. And I'm sitting there going, this dude just has a military grade Vietnam surplus fuel tank in his backyard for 8 years. But I went from 75 pounds, which was great on the receiving end because it could send us flying over the fence. But the bad news was we didn't weigh enough to actually send the guy on the other end when we were jumping off the roof. So the heavier we got, the easier it got to throw the other guy off the roof. But then, we also got heavier, so we didn't fly as far.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we did that for a while.
Oh my gosh. Oh God. Okay. So yeah, that's why we talk. That's why I have like.
And then from the girl's perspective, you played Barbie.
That's why I have to hear these stories, because nothing that we ever did.
Oh Christ!
Nothing we ever did
Jesus,
was anything like
crazy
that.
Thing we didn't die.
Did anybody get injured with the big black bouncy thing? Anybody?
I mean, not seriously injured. We there was the time I ended up in the hospital. I wasn't very good at skateboarding, and Damon, can't remember what Damon's last name was, but he lived on that same street. He had a 10-speed mountain bike or 15-speed mountain bike, and there's this one place on the road back behind there was like a connector road. It's weird. There was a retaining wall up to protect the noise from the houses. You could go down Flintwell, down to Monterey Highway, or you could go the other way, and there's this like service road that took you a mile down there, and it had a little bit of a grade to it down by the park, and I remember going, fast, and like helmets, like what's
No, there were no helmets.
What is that? Why would you wear a helmet? That's for idiots, right? That's what we thought.
Well, they weren't readily available either. I mean, the only helmets I remember ever seeing were motorcycle helmets growing up. There weren't like
motorcycle helmets,
yeah,
skateboard. But they probably came out with these later. But at least in the early '80s, nobody wore knee pads or gloves or helmets. But we weren't doing half pipe stuff either, so we weren't jumping. We were just riding on the street. But yeah, he was towing me on a mountain bike, and I remember looking down and seeing my feet doing this on the board, and then I woke up in the hospital. I don't remember anything after that, but I had fallen, and they said I kind of toppled like a bowling pin.
So I want to hear some of your
That was fun.
so your first dollar mowing lawns in the unibrow, your big black bouncy. Your unibrow grass, the big black bouncy thing, which is just classic. That's classic, Jeff. What about? I want to hear some without. I mean, there are some stories that I know that you should not tell on the family show.
Many of those.
But when you and Paul were in sales, there are some stories I know you could share. I mean, let's set the backdrop a little bit. You're getting into sales. You've got this master. I mean, he was a professional salesman. I don't know. He was a salesman, whether he was a professional or not. Paul, we love you. You know, we love you. And
he was in sales.
You were an amazing,
and he was a
sales guy.
I wouldn't really, I don't think he qualified as a mentor. But I definitely learned a lot about what not to do from him.
We learned a lot from Paul, but
God.
Tell me one of your stories of, but you know what? It's people, it's characters like Paul that bring the color to our lives. And the just sheer laughter into our lives. Can you tell us because what you're doing back in the day is we're selling
these credit card terminals. This is back in the day. Like now you just go get them from the bank. But local banks back, 30 years ago now, local banks didn't have programs to sell credit card terminals. They just dealt in cash and checks. And if you wanted to take credit cards, you would go to a bigger bank is what you would do. So we allowed smaller business banks to be able to create a merchant account.
Through transactions with the...
And we bought these little Nerite 2080 credit card terminals, which there's no chip, right? It's just mag stripe or hand key it in.
Mm-hmm.
You could hold them in your hand, but they were... I don't know, they weighed about 1.5 pounds.
Is this after you would put the credit card through the carbon and you run it this way,
Yeah,
or
and
is
then
this
you run that like a check.
and
Yeah.
then you put that
We
the
had
numbers
those.
into
We
that?
had those, but people wanted the electronic ones.
Okay, so
which,
you're actually selling swipeable
Yeah.
at this point.
Swipeable. You can look it up online. You can probably buy it now for $200, which is crazy. We bought it for $200, and we sold them for like $5,000 with a lease. It's like $80 a month. But the thing is you could make money on that because there was no internet.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't go online to buy something because you'd be afraid you'd get your credit card number stolen.
Mm-hmm.
That was the thing. So we're buying these things direct from the distributor for $250 or $300. Paul told me we paid $1,200 for them. So he would make an extra $900 in commissions on top of the $1,800 in commissions. So he was making like $2,700 per machine. I was making like $100 a machine, and I covered all my costs. But we had a marketing system, and I understood from that process how important marketing is in business. We would go down once a week that we could buy a list of all the new
Businesses,
addresses, names, name of business, and address for all the newly registered businesses in the state of Oregon and Washington. And we could buy them down at the state, and they would print them for us on sticky labels. And there'd be 800 new businesses every week. And we would go and buy at the printers these pre-printed postcards with the offers on them. And then we would drive down to Salem and pick up for $25, we'd get a list of 1,000 new businesses, all pre-printed labels on there for us. No database, no Salesforce.com CRM. Like, we mailed them once, and if they didn't want to buy, forget it. Like, we could care less. No repeat business, no referrals. We had a huge opportunity to do those things, but we didn't do it. But we did the marketing, and we would drive down like on Tuesday. The printers would have them done by Tuesday. We'd drive back up. We'd put them in the mail either Tuesday or Wednesday, and then the phones would ring Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, solid from hundreds of phone calls coming in, and we were the only ones that were mailing for credit card terminals to new businesses in the state of Oregon.
Wow.
And we did that for years.
Tell me about one of your stories of.
Oh.
You've got cold calling stories. You've got door knocking stories.
He didn't want to do service. He just wanted to sell and make the commission. So when people would call him as his guy that was accountable to him for their $80 a month on the credit card payment, he would pick up the phone and he would say in some accent, "Oh, you're not here. He in a meeting." He would say that, and it's him on the phone talking about it, but he would say he wasn't all. Sorry, he's in a meeting. He's in a meeting. You call back later. And it's him on the phone talking about, "No, we want to talk to Paul. Is Paul there? He in a meeting. You call back later." He would dodge phone calls all the time. He's like, he didn't want to talk to anybody unless they wanted to buy a merchant account machine. And then he told me that he was making $400 commission and that I should be happy he was splitting it with me for $200, and he was making like $3,000 a machine. I went into the hole on a credit card, like $25,000 that year. I think I cleared $8,000 in commissions, but I sold like 80 machines. So I was making like $100 a machine on the average, maybe $150, and I covered all my cost of us living and all of my driving up to Oregon and Washington. And I'm wondering, like, man, how is Paul living in this 4,000 square foot house, driving a 40-foot motorhome, and he's on vacation all the time? And it took me like 6 or 8 months to figure it out. I'm like, but there was no way to figure it out because you couldn't go online and look to see. Nobody would even think to go online to look and price check for an Elite 2080 pin pad.
Yeah.
Right? So it was a racket. I didn't feel like I was robbing anybody because I wasn't making any commissions.
Yeah.
Paul was making all the commissions.
Well, in the last few days, just at home and through studying, we've been talking about the stages of development and how in our development we get stronger with each skill. It's kind of like, I think I was reading about babies learning how to walk for the first time, and how there's these stages of development, and then with each stage of development, you take a forelearned skill, and that, like, they compile, right? Like, they build upon each other. Now, clearly you learned from working with Paul and being able to, having gone through those life experiences of not getting commissions and stuff. And you took what you learned and you moved it into the next job. And then into the next job. I think John Maxwell talks about it like failing forward. We're gonna fail forward. Are we gonna take what we've gone through and we're gonna learn for the next one, and then for the next one, and then for the next one? So what about I want to hear, and maybe if you can think back into the archives of your mind of stories going into stories that we haven't really talked about that much. But what about what is one of the highlight, going from the customer not being able to understand why they need what you have, and it can be in any of the businesses, any of the jobs that you've had in the past, doing anything, going from not being able to understand what you have, what they need, you being able to help them to understand what they need, and then like this victorious moment of where sales professional and customer come together, and you and they're not just happy with what the transaction, they're like telling their friends about the transaction.
I'd have to think about all the stuff I've sold.
Is there something that particularly stands out to where, like in the case of the woman's lawn who got mowed, she benefited greatly from getting her lawn mowed, and she's happy, and you benefited greatly because you were able to provide a service, and you were able to make some money and learn about business. Like what are some of your most,
I would say actually probably the first, as you know, I did multi-level for several years before you and I met, and then we did multi-level together for a while, and I think that was a really interesting sale.
mm-hmm.
And most of the people didn't get it or didn't want to do it, and didn't have a lot of value in it. But some people did. And I looked at it. The first time I looked at it, I was like 16 years old. I was at an NSA water filter meeting with a couple of friends from high school. I didn't get engaged, but I'm like, that makes sense. You buy a water filter, and then you go find 3 more people that need a water filter, sell to them, and then everybody's got to buy filters in the next year. So you have monthly recurring revenue, or you have, annual recurring revenue until you get to scale. And I'm looking at that like, that makes sense. And then they're going to pay a commission to me for helping other people be successful in their own business. Like, what's not good about that? And obviously there's the stigma is a big hurdle to overcome. And then the product lines, I didn't do water filters. We did another company, but I thought that was interesting to see that, like, the prospect of being in your own business and having the ability to file envelopes.
As you're talking about this, I remember when back in the day when we were in the business, and we had those info packs, and it was it was a pack that we had to pay for.
They made them cost effective.
They were cost effective for us, but they had little samples in it. It was like a little sample pack, and it was actually a really nice material, and it was
a duplicatable way of introducing.
And I remember we would drop it off, and then we would have to go back and pick it up.
That was fun.
And oh my gosh, there's so many times when they'd either come back beat to hell, or we would knock on the door to pick them up, and immediately the curtains would close, and you'd hear,
those people are back for their stuff.
You heard behind the door, shh. They're coming.
They're back.
They're here.
Those people are back, and they're trying to make us successful. Don't let them get near you. It's like, but most people did not understand what we were trying to do. But after doing that for several years, and we met some people.
Hey, a lot of people did return our product, and they
some people bought.
Tried it.
We had people come with us to functions and listen to tapes and started growing as people. And there's kids who've been born from married couples that we met and introduced free enterprise, and personal growth too, that were dead set against having any children at all. And now there's 5 or 6 new humans in the world here and there that would not have been born probably because of the position that the people are in. And I think the biggest thing that did for me of going out and sitting in living rooms and over coffee tables and going to Starbucks and just trying to do something to improve the quality of another person's life when there really wasn't anything they could do for you in exchange on the front end. On the back end, maybe. But on the front end, they're not saying, please help me. They're saying, why are we meeting, right? What is this? I saw 2 things from that. And we're talking, 10 plus years invested in doing this and hundreds of couples that we've known over the years doing this. The number one thing that I noticed was that faith is not something you can really describe, but when you find someone who has it, it's a miracle. And that's the good news. And the bad news was that the state of the average American home, living on $30,000 or $40,000 a year of income at the time, this is probably in the early 1990s. The average state of the American home in the richest country in the history of the world, after husband and wife spent 12 plus years going to public school learning how to be a failure, basically learn how to fail financially because they are not being taught the American system of economics, which is free enterprise and business ownership, that the state of the average American family was absolutely pathetic. And to take the average and add a dream and some hope and an idea of how someone could improve themselves and actually have that take root in the 1 out of 10 or the 1 out of 20 families that we'd actually meet with that wanted to improve their lives was
I'm going to put a pin because
amazing,
I think there's a really important aspect that you touched on. I don't think that the majority of the American people today in this generation understand that our laws, the current laws of economics that we're living by right now, were written by tycoons and industry billionaires alongside with the they worked with the politicians to create the laws.
That's right.
And that there are laws in place, what they call loopholes, and these loopholes that now business owners understand because they've learned the system of economics.
They call them loopholes because they don't understand that they're in the tax code.
But they've been I think that people
businesses
are. I think that people try to understand, but they're coming from it from this is the government body's here to help me. The government is run in an almost socialistic state. That's what they're thinking, not what the way it is. The government are the ones that have written the rules and written the laws, and they're totally mistaken.
Business people.
The government did not write our current tax codes and economic policies. The tycoons like the Rockefellers and the Astors and the Gettys and the you name them, the Carnegies, they came alongside with the current president and the leaders at the time and the politicians at the time, and they wrote these laws together in order to favor businessmen in order to pay less taxes. And whether you agree with that being a correct moral code or ethics or not, that's beside the point. It's the way that those laws were written initially is by tycoons and by American businessmen from the 1800s to the early 1900s.
Who understood how fragile the American economic system actually was and how much it needed to be protected.
Yeah.
And it's protected by the tax codes, which incentivize business owners and landowners and
so when while it is certainly not a politically correct statement, while it is certainly definitely more arrogant than not,
always correct.
When Trump was saying it makes me I don't pay these types of taxes, it doesn't make me a non-tax, it makes me smart. What he's saying is that he understands the tax code that's available for everybody.
Yeah, everybody. You don't have to be Donald Trump to take advantage of the taxes. And let's be honest, the smart Democrats
Yeah.
take advantage of it too.
Yes, they do.
They're just talking out of both sides
And
of their
when he's
mouths
saying the smart, what
when
he's saying is
they
those
say
that
that the advantages they're taking
understand,
are not good.
right, those that understand the current economic system was not written by government employees trying to benefit the people necessarily. It was written by business owners in the late 1800s,
Who are
early
trying
1900s,
to conserve
trying
wealth,
to conserve
which is
wealth,
why they
their
call
own
them
wealth.
conservative, right?
Their own wealth to start, but
Yeah.
also if they understood that if they could make it a law, then it would be set up for you,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
end person, the current person in business, to be able to take advantage of those same exact laws that you can write off a portion of your house if you're a business owner. You can write off and be able to not be taxed on business expenses for education or business supplies. There are so many content creators now, and we have people you have people asking, well, how can a 16-year-old make all this money or buy their own house or whatever? Well, let me tell you what, they have very wise lawyers who are taking advantage of the tax codes,
Which are there for
there
16-year-olds.
for everybody.
Sure.
No matter, unbiased in their approach
That's
to
why
how
the
you
law
handle
exists,
economics.
is to help everybody. It's to serve the people.
Yeah.
So, I would say that was probably one of the more interesting sales, was trying to sell free enterprise, trying to sell the idea of freedom and work from home and be happily married and have kids and homeschool them if you want. And I think I was talking about this a couple of days ago, that I don't really know when I started thinking like I do, just different from everybody else. But I would say it probably had a period. There was a period of time as a young adult where I was reading tapes and listening to books, and listening to tapes, indoctrinating myself with the founding fathers' mission, which was to have a government that supported and protected people's ability to be free from the very government that was protecting them in as much as was physically possible. And that by doing that, you could become an attorney, you could put out a shingle, you could build a firm, you could hire other attorneys, and you could provide services in your town, and you could create wealth and scale through the leveraging of either financial assets or labor or some other form of technology, whether it's software code or otherwise. So that not everybody thinks like that. And to me, I know I can intellectually understand the concept that not everybody thinks that freedom is a good thing. Not everybody does. And people might be sitting here arguing that point that everybody thinks that freedom is good. Not everybody. Because if they thought that freedom was good, they wouldn't be voting for governments that take freedom away from humans. Or they wouldn't be allowing governments that take freedom away from humans to continue to exist, like
I
what we
don't think
see.
that. I don't think they see it
Russia.
as freedoms being taken away. I think that they're
because they never had
presented
them.
through
In
propaganda.
Russia's case.
Through propaganda, they're being presented a trade. There's a trade. There's trade-offs. It's like they explain it away by saying there's a trade-off here. If you give us this, then we give you that. It's like the mafia in the sense, if you've watched any of the Godfather movies. Like, we'll give you protection. You give us your money, we'll give you protection. It's the same as the British over sending us into America, sending their, as we were coming to America initially, the British stayed back in England and they said, we'll send you supplies and you send us your money for your taxes and we'll give you protection and we'll give you this and we'll give you that.
Yeah.
They're not looking at it as my freedoms are being taken away necessarily. They're more looking at it like, well, I'm guaranteed protection if I do this, and so I'm just going to keep. And what they're a frog in a pot. How do you kill it? You slowly heat the
Boil it slowly and
it'll die.
out.
Right. Well, the people are or getting taxed more and more as the time went on, and they were giving away their freedoms because their taxes were getting. And then it became, this is no longer a good trade. I'm no longer getting benefit from the cost is costing me too much.
Yeah, and that's where when things are bad, people get tough, and when people get tough, they start working, and when they start working, things start getting better, and when things start getting better, they get easier. When things get easier, people get lazy. And when people get lazy, things get hard.
I
So
wonder what it's going to have to
it's a
get to
weird-
for people to get to that point where, like, taxes, like sales tax. We live in California. Sales tax is 9.25% on everything that we spend. Like what's it got to get to for the people to say, I'm not getting the value out of this trade any longer. I'm not getting the benefit from.
Well, you're starting to see people leave California. That's part of it. The other thing is they're
like, does it
looking
have to get to 15% before people say, you know what, I'm just going to not spend money anymore, and we're going to go back to the trade system. Yeah, I've got this, and you've got that, and let's just trade, and now it costs us no money at all.
Well, it depends on how you look at it, right? Because the entrepreneur just looks at it and says, I'll just make more money.
Yeah.
I'll just leverage more capital. I'll leverage more code. I'll leverage more content. I'll leverage more labor. And we'll just overcome the taxes by being successful. But the barrier of entry into business, and it's high. But it's high, but the government can't do anything unless you're productive.
Right.
The government can't operate. It can't do the roads. There's nothing to tax if you're not productive. So you have to be productive.
Yeah, interesting train of thought to see where it would go into. This is not it's not a political show at all. It's just we're talking about things that we have personally been through, and going through multi-level marketing, and going through being in
sales.
the home by home.
We did the math on it. I've worked for Fortune 50 software companies for
the last 16 years.
16 of the last 20 years, with a year in consulting, a year at a partner, and a couple of years working for a small business that we started and grew into a big business. But I've worked for large companies a lot of the time. I've always had a side hustle or I played professional golf for 10 years, tried to make a business out of that. I had a consulting business, tried to make a business out of that. Got digital and social media and affiliate marketing programs that we're working on. We've got this podcast. I've still done speaking engagements, consulting retainers, and coaching through the years. But we're constantly working on business ideas in order to exercise our rights to enjoy freedom as Americans of having a business, of having the means of production of a laptop, internet connection, and a cell phone be something that a private citizen has the right to own. And you don't have that in socialist countries. And as a result of that, not only does the government own all the means of production, but they own all the yield, all the production itself, anything that you invent, all of the patents, everything. The Tetris movie was a perfect example of that. And yet you still have development in those countries anyway because of the human spirit and the desire for that entrepreneurship to take place. So anyway, it's good rhetoric today, I think.
Yeah, can you close us out? Let's say, I'm trying to think of a funny story that we could close out on that might be. I mean, we've had so many.
That guy was just one continuous story. There was Mitch and I did the apartment cleaning business for a couple of years, and we'd do a batch of towels. We'd wash the towels in the apartment that we were cleaning, which is fine. We're cleaning towels. They were washers and dryers that were owned. And there were some days where we were so tired that we'd just get a fresh bag of towels and we'd just lie down on the floor in an empty apartment after we'd cleaned the carpet and just take a nap.
You gotta tell.
What's that?
As we close out today.
What's this?
You gotta tell.
Throwing stuff out the window?
No, the potato story. Everybody's gonna have a good potato story.
Let's just say that not all apartments are created equal.
And to set the stage, you were doing move out apartment cleaning, guys. This is like
this is the worst of the worst.
This is
not showing up in my.
I think that the worst job would be having to clean up after dead bodies. But
never
this
did any
is like
dead
the
bodies.
Second to the worst.
Never
when
did
people,
any dead bodies.
if you lived in an apartment and you moved out or got evicted, Jeff would be the guy that you would have called to come and clean up
if someone
the mess.
else is going to be living in your apartment next week, how do we get it ready for turnover? Well, we go in and this, it didn't always end well, right? If people were evicted. This apartment, this guy and gal were evicted from this apartment, and they were going to stick it to them, I guess. So they had whatever, a 5-pound bag of potatoes and whatever food. Jessica's dying laughing over.
Because I never saw it.
Yeah.
But the
But
story.
so you know how they have the little things that poke up that you put the glasses on in the
Dishwasher.
dishwasher? Yeah. There was a potato on every single one of those. On the top rack and the bottom rack. I guess they just needed to wash their potatoes before they left, but there's like a 5-pound bag of potatoes stuck on every single one of the tines in the dishwasher. And then there was like, they stuck one on the sink, on the faucet. Yeah.
Up on the
And then they took the handles off on the side of stuck a potato. So you had potatoes for the
hot and cold water.
For the hot and cold water on the sink. And then there was one, like they took a nail out in the front door, bam, 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 and then stuck a potato. So I was like, oh, that's where the potato people live. Oh, that's their wreath, I guess, for Christmas, maybe. But yeah, that was weird. And then, oh my God, the worst apartment. We did 1,100 apartments.
Oh my God.
In like 3 years.
That's why you would be sacked out on a stack of dry.
Yeah, we had to do two apartments. We had to do 2 apartments a day to make our budget. So we're cleaning 2 just disgusting, dirty, gross apartments every single day, 5 days a week. But it was entrepreneurship, and I didn't have to have a job, which was, there were some advantages to that. And the worst apartment we ever cleaned was our next door neighbor in Tualatin. This guy he was obviously jacked up on drugs. We had 2 like 20-foot dumpsters just to get rid of all the garbage and the trash and the dead animals and just crap from his fridge. I mean, the fridge was like a non-starter. We did not clean the fridge. We replaced it. We had to use trisodium phosphate to scrub all the, and then like we would scrub. He chain smoked in the apartment for like 10 years, and the tar would bleed through the drywall, through the paint. So he's got latex paint over primer over drywall, and we would take trisodium phosphate with mops and scrub off of the paint all of the tar that had built up. And the next day we were there like 3 weeks. The next day we would come back, and the tar would have bled through the paint from the drywall. I mean, it was like the inside of a bus station. It was awful.
Oh my God.
There were hypodermic needles by the hundreds, all used, all dangerous, all with whatever, probably heroin in there. There were hundreds of those all over the floor, bills that hadn't been paid. I mean, I couldn't believe we pulled 2 dumpsters worth of trash out of this 2x2.
It was a townhouse, yeah.
Yeah. So that nice little happy, disgusting story to finish on that one. But
well, at the
like
potatoes,
we lived in the slums. Like we lived on Southwest 67th Avenue in Tualatin, and it was like all multifamily housing. So I'm glad we had a parking spot in front of our house that we could have legally had someone towed because there was nowhere else to park. We only had 1 car.
Yeah.
And it was a detached garage. I remember that was cool. We paid an extra $20 because we had a detached garage. But yeah, that was the beginning of our time as a young family, because you were pregnant with Jeffrey and we needed to save money. So we left the Kingsgate apartment. We were in Kingsgate Cove or Lake Oswego Cove.
We were in a nice apartment, and then I came home from work, and so we went to a less expensive place.
But you were, a lot of women would gripe about having to get rid of a fancy apartment or whatever, and you were like, no, this is what we got to do because I'm coming home because I'm on my feet all day at a retail job, and I would do anything to stay home with this kid. And I'm like, all right, well, $620 a month, I think, for rent back then. And we made it work for years.
We went from like 800, it was like 735 or something, to 620. Like we were able to save $100 just by moving to the other side of town.
It was 850 and it dropped to 620.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Kingsgate.
130. We dropped $130 a month, but that's what made the difference, just moving across town. But oh my gosh, so many fun stories and so many memories.
We don't live like that anymore. Thank goodness.
If I can encourage anybody that might be in those situations where you're struggling and you're living, day by day and paycheck to paycheck, is just do we decided a long time ago that we were going to use our imagination and we were going to imagine what life could be like. We were going to play the what could it look like game, the what do we want it to look
And
like
we would
game.
drive our piece of garbage cars. They were the worst, but we would go through the neighborhoods. We were looking
Absolutely.
at the multi-million-dollar houses with the Ferraris and the Range Rovers, and we'd be like, someday we're going to be living in a house like this.
Yeah,
We're going to do
and
it. We're
just
going
like
to do it.
visualize and imagine that that was the street that we lived in, and those
Yeah.
were the driveways that we were pulling in. And I remember I was telling, and as we wrap up, I was telling Sonia because she was kind of asking like, hey, we're getting married. Any advice? Because she asked a whole bunch of women about like the advice that they would give, and I said, no matter what you do, if you can, as you can, of course, keep up date nights and keep going out and seeing each other. But even if you can't afford to do it, like you can't afford to have a full meal at a really nice sit down restaurant, do what we
Cheesecake.
did, and we would go and we would get dessert. We would find
Cheesecake and
find the
coffee.
most expensive restaurant, and we would
Esplanade.
make sure that we had enough to give a tip because we were taking up time at a table. And so if you're taking up time at a table, know that the waiter's going to lose out tips if you're just going to sit there. Don't be rude. Kids, don't be rude.
Kids,
Take at least
rude.
enough to have a tip and then have a dessert, but definitely embrace the atmosphere. Get out there. Go to the nicest places of town. Go and if you're gonna get coffee somewhere, where's the nicest place that you can go get coffee that you can think of? There's a atmospheric understanding.
We used to go to Nordstrom.
Yep.
And you would have me try on like designer jeans and nice shoes and nice shirts and nice jackets.
Just stand in front of the mirror.
Stand in front of the mirror, and then I remember you would take a camera, a Polaroid camera, and you would take pictures of me. And I felt really uncomfortable doing it because I was like, somebody's gonna have to hang these back up because I'm not paying for this stuff. You're like, nope, this is part of their job,
Yep.
and you have to change the way you see yourself. And clothes are a great way to do that. Clothes are a great way to do that. And I've always had nice clothes ever since we started making money. I've always made sure and have like everything in my closet be nice because I can and because I wanted to be able to look nice and feel good. And because of that, I started lifting weights and I started filling out.
Well, and as a couple where you're the face, you're the one that's earning in our business model called Our Family.
So far.
So far,
it's been
career wise, while I was raising
you'll
children,
get there.
you were out there, doing the majority of the money earning, and as the majority money earner, you needed to look the part. You needed to have the clothes in order to go with that, and that was part of the cost of doing
would
just the
not
cost of doing
recommend
business.
people going out and spending money they don't have to buy clothes so that they can look good. We did. I don't think I ever spent. Very rarely did I ever spend money I didn't have on clothes. But we would get the nice stuff at the secondhand stores.
Yeah.
And
or just have
save
one
up
staple or two staples.
Yeah, and always buy
then the
basics,
rest,
right?
yeah.
White shirts, blue shirts, blue jackets, dark jeans.
And cost of manufacturing has got down so low that,
Oh my
that
gosh.
it's not. I mean, you go to the Goodwill. A couple episodes, I was talking about that Gucci T-shirt that I got at the Goodwill.
Yeah.
Like you can find anything now at secondhand stores, and it's become a thing where it's a lot more fun to go vintage or retro and go shopping and do the whole thing. They're very boutique now. Even the thrift shops are much more so.
Well,
than
and people
when we were
buy
growing
boutique
up.
stuff and they give it away just like they gave away T-shirts from Kmart when I was a kid. So
Yeah.
you're going to find, you've seen some great finds at Goodwill.
Yeah.
Savers through the years. So
Woohoo.
anyway, the big thing is that you're going to be moving in a direction of your clearest, strongest, most dominant picture of what you're focused on. Whether it's the car that you want. I wanted a really nice car for a long time. I wanted a really nice watch for a long time. I wanted really nice clothes. I wanted to take vacations. Then I wanted work that was really satisfying and enjoyable. And you wanted a really nice house with lots of nice stuff in it and full of kids and vacations and trips that we could take. And we've done just about everything I could think of that we had on our bucket list when we were like 25. We accomplished just about all of it before I turned 40 because we had a clear picture of what we were doing. And we're not even, we have friends that have made hundreds of millions of dollars, way more successful than we are financially. But we've done all the stuff we really had a clear picture in doing. So that's part of trying on the clothes and test driving the cars.
So keep up the vision, keep it going. I think next week and on our next podcast, maybe we'll dig a little deeper into being specific and maybe go through like visualizing and having some visualization techniques, like writing it down, keeping it plain and simple in front of your eyes, having a plan,
some sort of a plan.
Yeah.
How much time have I spent working on systems and plans so that I could get better at real-time decision making? I mean, that's been my obsession for 15 years.
And with that, we are so glad that you tuned in, and we will see you next week when we will continue to expand the discussion and talk about getting specific about what it is that we are believing and visualizing for.
Thanks
Have
for
an
joining
awesome
us,
week,
everybody,
guys.
at the Jeff Heilman Project, and we'll see you next week.